Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Walk the Block, Navigating Digital Finance. We have a two-man show tonight. You got yourself, myself, your host, Zenith for the evening, and my good friend Jay, who's hopefully going to be better with the English today than I am. How you doing, buddy?
I think you're asking for too much, man. Remember, you're speaking to an immigrant here, and sometimes my English is not so good. But I'll try my best.
I like it. So tonight for the show, we have, obviously, the title, History of HEX and Pulsechain. Want to do a quick run through to get everyone new out there caught up to speed on what it is and a little bit of why we like it. And then, of course, we're not one to shy away from any criticism. So if you have pros and cons, we'll happy to be address either of those. Outside of that, though, Jerome Powell did testify before Congress, and he had a fun time where he got peppered with questions about the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, the CFBC. So that was, in my opinion, a little bit of a nothing burger congressional testimony. However, at the same time, there are some good nuggets that we will talk about. And then outside of that, obviously the markets. We have no traditional markets because it is President's Day. But outside of that, we do have the crypto markets because we run 24/7, baby. So with that being said, Jay, any thoughts before we get going on some TA?
I think people are. I spoke about this for a little bit yesterday on our flagship show over at Degen Roundtable, and I know that the current sentiment of the market right now is fairly depressed, right? Because this is the current point in time where, well, if you were to consider traditional market cycle theory, it's the time when we expect Bitcoin dominance to start coming down and altcoins to finally start outpace Bitcoin in terms of price action. However, I think one of the primary reasons, and you mentioned Jerome Powell, I think one of the primary reasons why we're not getting that kind of alt season at this point in time, I think largely is because of monetary policy. We can go over it briefly today, but at least for the last few, well, in particular last cycle, right? The Federal Reserve started QE in September of 2019. And when you check not just Ethereum Bitcoin, but if you check Total 3 Bitcoin, if you check others Bitcoin, all of them found a bottom around that time, right? And then obviously when QE started becoming more aggressive, especially after the COVID dip, right? That's when risk assets really started to take off. And unfortunately, this time it is different, right? We are in the post-halving year, but the Federal Reserve is still in a period of quantitative tightening, right? They're not increasing rates any higher, but 450 points is still high, right? Even though we're down 100 basis points from the peak, 450 is still high, and risk assets don't like that. And so it is my personal opinion that I don't think you're going to get any kind of sustained rally by the altcoins until, at the very minimum, Jerome Powell says, okay, we're going to start resuming the rate cuts, right? But it's also positive in the sense that I think if we were to pinpoint a prime candidate for an extended 4-year cycle, that it would be actually this 4-year cycle, right? Because let's take a hypothetical scenario that Jerome Powell, because of the recent, especially last week's inflation numbers, they weren't very good, right? And so let's assume that Jerome Powell on the next Fed meeting says, look, we think inflation is still threatening to have a resurgence. We're going to keep interest rates still elevated. We're probably going to, best case scenario, we're going to stay the course and keep the planned 2 rate cuts for this year at 2. Worst case scenario, he says, look, I know we said 2, we're going to go to 0. and so let's say that
might be worst case scenario.
That's the worst case scenario. Let's say that hypothetical scenario does come true, right? Now imagine, so instead of us getting rate cuts early, things get better near the tail end of the year, and then he starts getting aggressive with rate cuts at the tail end of the year, and then he's like, yo, we're going to start getting aggressive with QE now, right? So I think if you get that scenario, right, aggressive QE near the tail end of this year, that could extend the 4-year cycle, right? Because now you've just created, at least in terms of monetary policy, you've now created an environment that risk assets really like, right? You have some degree of certainty that interest rates are coming down. I mean, or inflation is coming down and staying down, because otherwise you wouldn't get aggressive QE, right? The labor market is probably stable. Unemployment is probably stable. And so you're getting not just loose policy, but you're also getting some degree of certainty within the market, right? So now you created a scenario that risk assets really like. And so if that happens at the tail end of this year, we might not get that kind of DeFi summer that 2021 had, but we might just get that extended cycle, right? I think if I were to single out one variable as to what could extend our cycle, right, our 4-year cycle, I think it would be aggressive QE at the tail end of this year.
That seems like an option. I for one, have never really been a big fan of the extended cycle theory, which is that the 4-year cycle seems to be pretty darn consistent, I have to say.
Yeah.
So until it's officially broken, I'm just going to assume that holds. Because the reason that I say that is also, I got in to crypto, like fully like DeFi crypto, self-custody stuff in 2021, 2022. So around that time, I came in right after a lot of people were swearing about how that one was an extended cycle. It was going to keep going, is going to keep running. And then it turned out it wasn't. So I saw all the people that believed the hype, and then I saw just how burned they were. So now that I'm starting to see the hype again, I got some skepticism about it. So I'm personally not on that side of the camp, but I understand where the macroeconomics can line up with it, where once we have QE and we actually have a little bit more of that free money, so to speak, or that cheap US dollar, then it could really start to see people put it in assets that are more risk on, or at least try to hedge against some sort of inflation, or try to make some sort of gains while it's still possible. So that part I do understand for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm with you, right? I think you and I are fairly confident that we don't assume things like patterns break or trends break until they actually do. But I figured I would entertain the scenario, right? Because yesterday I was leaning bear short term, and I didn't want to just depress the chat and depress our viewers with the bear scenario. So I was like, oh, okay, let me throw them a bone, right? And that was kind of the bone, right? That if we were to have an extended cycle, then here is the conditions that we must meet in order for that to happen, right? You mentioned the hype of the extended cycle last in 2021, right? And how people got burned. And I think a lot of that had to do with monetary policy too, right? You were in a period of QE for basically what, from 2019, 2021, more than 2 years, right? And then 2022 happened, and the Federal Reserve says, okay, no more free money, no more money printer. And they started QT aggressively, right? As in like 75 points, 75 points, 50 points, 50 points consecutively, right? And so me as an, hindsight is obviously very powerful, but me as an analyst looking back and looking at how aggressive they were approaching QT in 2022, the result was obvious. No more free money, no more expansion, right? From these companies. Nobody's funneling money into their tickers. And so how could you get an extended cycle like that, right? When nobody's buying anything anymore. So but again, that's a singular variable, right? The Federal Reserve and monetary policy. But I mean, I don't think it can be underscored just exactly how powerful of an influence the Federal Reserve and Jerome Powell has on the behavior of risk assets, and by extension the behavior of people that buy risk assets.
I completely agree. I know over on DGen Roundtable, we covered the Creature from Jekyll Island, which is a history of the Federal Reserve, and it kind of feels like a tinfoil hat fever dream, talking about how a cabal of bankers got together and created a semi-private, semi-public, mostly private institution to control interest rates in the United States. Yeah. Which then became the world superpower. So there's effectively a private institution that's in charge of the largest or the most important interest rate in charge of the entire global economy, effectively.
Yep.
And then we're going to
Exactly.
cover on that a little bit later when we talk about some of the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau stuff, because it was set up in a way that's almost similar to the Federal Reserve. So I have
Yikes.
some personal criticisms for that, but I think you're correct. The fact that the Fed is a semi-independent agency that has the ability to affect the money supply is so large and so massive, it does have the ability to affect the crypto markets like we're talking about. So is it crypto directly? No, but it's very important, and we think it's important enough to actually pay attention to for our
Yeah.
to monitor for the strategies that we implement as crypto investors ourselves.
Yeah.
By the
And
way, we
it's a
have
double whammy, right? It's a double
oh
whammy
yeah,
because not only do you have the reserve that controls monetary policy, but we also have the ability to print, right? The treasury can print. So not
yep.
only can you control monetary policy, but you can also control the supply. So it's like the worst of the worst. Worst case scenario, the worst case scenario.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely a double-edged sword for the
Yeah.
people that are believers in modern monetary theory and Keynesian economics. Yeah, sure, this is a great tool to help implement your world vision and your economic ideology. However, at the same time, it is a hell of a drug and can absolutely be used to wreck a currency. Outside of that, though, real quick, we do have a quick comment from one of our good friends, Centurion54X. He says, "What's up, guys? Good to see you, my man." To Centurion and everybody else out there, if you have any questions about anything we're talking about tonight, please drop it in the chat. We'll pull it up. We'll talk about it. We'll try to cover it as much as we possibly can. Outside of that, though, are we ready to get some charts going?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me go ahead and share my screen here for everybody. So if you want the macro perspective on price action, I would encourage people to please double check on the analysis that we did yesterday on DGen Roundtable, because I go over actually the monthly chart for Bitcoin. So for now, we're going to go over the local price action and be a bit more granular. As always, we're going to go over both price, trend, momentum, and we're going to go over time as well with the 60-day cycles. But we'll start granular with the 1 hour chart here. So as I mentioned earlier, I am personally leaning short-term bearish, in particular because of the current market structure, right? We are still, even though I said that on this move up right over here, that the bulls had a very convincing sweep of the all-time high with accompanying volume. However, the following structure, which is what we're observing at this moment, right, does not convince me that the bulls are in control of the market. And that is because we are still range bound. And being range bound, like so, right, you have a lot of sideways action here, like so, or corrective structures, right, very three-wave-ish in nature, but in this case, we're range bound, is by its nature corrective. Now, on the bright side, the good thing about being range bound means that on a balance of probabilities, at a later point in time, we're still heading up, right? Because of the structure that we're observing here, we're more impulsive, right? This very steep and sharp 5-wave moves to the downside, right? That would convince me that we might be in bear market territory, or at least the minimum, in for a much steeper and more aggressive move to the downside. But because we are range bound in nature, this is corrective. And so it's making me confident that at some point down along the line, we are looking for further price action. But as it currently stands, it is my personal opinion that over the short term, probably within the next 1 or 2 weeks, we are still headed for lower prices, at least for Bitcoin. All right, so what are our potential targets to the downside? Well, the structure that we are observing is as follows. You have your green count in large degree, which is a W, X, Y, to complete your 4 in a larger degree, right? That's in orange before our wave 5 during the latter part of this year for higher prices for Bitcoin. You can see we already have a W in and an X, and so we are waiting for this Y to come in. And within your Y, you have an A already in, a B already in, and we are now looking for the finished C, which would complete your entire corrective sequence. And so, what are our price targets to the downside? Well, I would like to bring your attention to this box here, which sits at the range of between 88,847 on the lower side and 91,696 on the higher side. I think that there is a big probability, right, a high probability, I should say, that if we do get low prices, we are going to land somewhere within this box. The reasons for that are as follows. Firstly, we have a monthly point of control sitting at 91,545, so just within that box. Number two, a weekly point of control at 89,371. And then we have some horizontals in terms of Fibonacci. Your first Fibonacci pull taken from the start to the end of W to the end of X. And you can see that the 1-for-1 fib extension and the 1.236 fib extension also fall right there within that box. Lastly, a second trend-based fib extension taken from the start to the end of A, right? We're now looking at the lower degree count in purple to the end of B. And the 1-for-1 fib extension, once again, and the 1.236 fib extension also both fall within that box. So a lot of confluence in terms of points of controls and Fibonacci levels, all within that box that I drew out for you, in between 88,847 and 91,696. Also, if you notice, we also have a cycle low, right? Our prior 60-day cycle low sitting at $89,000 plus change. What's the exact number there? 89,000. Sorry. That was a low of 90,204. Is that the correct day? Let me just double check. No, sorry. The low was 89,164, right? That was our last 60-day cycle low. So you can see that we have a ton of horizontal support as well as points of control where majority of trading volume occurs, all sitting within that box. And so here is kind of your best case scenario. Well, we have a few best, bad, worst, whatever, however you want to rank order those things. Right? Obviously, our best case scenario is if we get a right translated 60-day cycle. So let's actually go and switch back to the daily chart so we can take a look at our 60-day cycles. All right. So your best case scenario is a right translated 60-day cycle, which would mean we take out your day 7 high here. That's our all-time high currently. However, like I mentioned, because of the time spent and because of the corrective nature of the current market structure, I don't think we actually get a right translated cycle. I think we get a left translated cycle. So what's the next best case scenario for the bulls? Well, the next best case scenario is a higher low, which means at the very end of our current 60-day cycle, which puts us at around March 14th, if we extrapolate this all the way out to 60 days, it lands us at the second week of March. And so a better case scenario for the bulls is a left translated cycle, but we have a higher low, which means you do not take out this low here at 91,530. Now, if you do take out that low, let's turn, where's my box? I don't know why I turned that off. Here we go. Now, if we do take out that low, then the next area of support would be right down here on our last 60-day cycle low. So that's your next best case scenario, right? You come down, you take out the low at 91.5, and then you find support here at 89,000. Your worst case scenario is if you lose 89,000, and then the bears send us all the way down to basically our last level of horizontal support, which is the bottom of your trading range here at $85,000. This is kind of the make or break scenario for the bulls, right? Because if you lose $89,000, there is a significant area here where there is absolutely zero horizontal support. That is a very big gap. And the next area of horizontal support that you're going to find is basically the very top of our last trading range, right? You guys should be familiar with that trading range. Why? Well, because if we zoom out here on the weekly, that trading range was right here. All of the time that we spent in the middle of last year, right? This was like from late April all the way up until, let's see here, late October. So a bit over 6 months that we spent in that trading range. That's your next major area of horizontal support, right? The very top of that trading range. And for those of you who tuned into yesterday's analysis, you know that we have a wave 4 invalidation here at $74,500 plus change. And so if the bears manage to push price action all the way down there, then it's going to flip me from a short-term bearish scenario, but long-term bullish outlook into both a short-term and a long-term bearish outlook, right? Especially if we hit that invalidation at $74,500 plus change. All right. So that $85,000 level is your make or break for the bulls. Ideally, you do find support at those higher price points that we spoke about. But if the bears pushes lower, then you want $85,000 to hold. So that's what I have for Bitcoin. Z, did you have anything to add?
Only thing I would add is some of the moving average indicators, which is that we're well above our 200-day moving average indicator right now, which is our long term, and then we're also a decent amount above our 140-day or the 20-week, if you will. But there is an interesting one that I've been looking at, which matches up very nicely with some of our recent lows, and that is the 111-day moving average indicator. Right here on the February 3rd wick low lines up darn near perfectly, and it also approaches this trading area that we've been approaching, or kind of settling into rather over the last 2 weeks. So we have another one on the 12th of February, matches up very, very nicely. And then again, even where we're at for our close of yesterday / today and our open, we're right around that area. So in my mind, this is kind of a critical juncture because we just had the 20-day move below the 50. And then at this point, we either use this as a little bit of support and move upwards from here, or we just bust right through it and keep dropping lower until we get down to some of our further support areas. So our 20-week is going to be right around 89, I want to say. Yep, $89,046. And then
where's 200 sitting at, Z?
I want to say it's sitting at like 79,000, 80,343.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know what 80,000 is also, Z? It is the 0.5 Fibonacci retracement for your wave 4.
Oh, interesting.
It's kind of nice.
Okay.
It's kind of nice, yeah.
It's nice when all the indicators and all the tools line up nicely and they play well together. Yeah. It's a real treat when that happens. At the same time, though, it doesn't indicate that price is guaranteed to do something because there's always a possible black swan event, and there's also outside other forces beyond just what you're looking at on your chart. Keep in mind, you can start to kind of read the tea leaves and understand what's going on and create that holistic picture. But at the same time, always understand you could be leaving something out. But overall, though, I think between the both of us, we put together a pretty holistic approach. I'm definitely on the simpler side, and I think that you have a little bit more of the advanced stuff when it comes to the Fibonacci retracements, and then talking about building both the bullish and bearish case scenario for me. So that's what I got for Ethereum. Any I guess the only other thing we didn't really touch on is RSI. RSI is looking at it hasn't dropped below this 41 level here pretty much since we had after we had our cycle, or after our cycle high, not this cycle, but the one before it, we had that day 43 high. And then over here on the 20th of December, we dropped down, and then we started forming this support on the RSI for the daily. Yeah. So, yeah, I will say your idea that we could have a left translated 60-day cycle for Bitcoin, it's something that definitely catches my eye for sure. If that's the case, then that would mean that this cycle is a bit of an anomaly from the day 7 high standpoint. Before this, a day 8 high was the record for the shortest cycle high that we've previously had. So if we maintain this day 7 high, that will be a new first. But at the same time, looking at the overall structure, kind of where the momentum indicators are at, where the support and resistance levels are, I could definitely see the case for even something as short as a 42-day cycle that would put us out here 24th of December, 24th of February, and then all the way up one standard deviation to about the day 50 mark, all the way to the 4th of March. That seems, it seems possible. That would line up nicely to get a good pump into March, and then around that time, it's that the Boxy Drew is actually a really interesting one because that was about from like 91.5 down to like 88.5, was it? Or 87.5?
The high 88s.
High 88s. Okay. Yeah, I could see that. Just maybe like a wick low down to confirm a cycle end before moving up again, or at least stabilizing it for a bit before a move to the upside. That's definitely within the realm of possibility. Even out to a day 60. Day 60 would be on the 14th of March.
Yeah. For me, ideally, this correction would end and we either get a higher low or we sweep the low sometime around the 3rd to 4th week of February. If I were to just take my fib times here, let's see. Ideally, where would my wave C end here? So if we compare the length of A to the length of C, ideally, a 1-for-1 fib time would place us at about the third week of February, right? 3rd week of February, probably early 4th week. So ideally, that's where this correction would end, and then we head up into a new cycle, right? But the reason why I'm leaning short-term bearish is because even though we made that strong move into all-time highs, man, like there's no strength. There's absolutely no strength in terms of price action, right? And then you combine that with the structure, very range bound in nature, nothing impulsive. It makes me lean corrective. It makes me lean left translated, right? So if like the bulls can convince me, right? But you're going to actually have to convince me with some price action, with some volume, with some momentum, right? And with some impulsivity on the structure, right? Because everything that price has given me, it's all corrective. It's all sideways, range bound, 3-wavy in nature, not 5-wave impulsive in nature to the upside, right? So it's like all of the variables kind of lean in favor of the bears at this moment in time, right? So again, I'm happy to be wrong because I want price to go up the same as everybody else, right? But it's like I have to be pragmatic here. I can't just impose what I want to happen and what I want to see on the chart. So hopefully third to 4th week of February is when we get the cycle low. It's well within the timeline for the corrective structures to finish as well.
Yeah, I mean, only time will tell though. So until then, we just gotta keep a weather eye on the horizon, so to speak, and just be ready to
I got my
move
buy orders, man. I've got buy orders set at $89,000 Bitcoin, at $88,000 Bitcoin, and at 91.5, right? I have buy orders right in that box.
All right, do you want to touch on Ethereum real quick?
I mean, we're 36 minutes in. Ethereum is...
Let's get her going.
It's the same old, same old.
Here's the TLDR. Ethereum is sitting at like what, 27 and change right now? Yeah, 27.30. Yeah. It's slightly on the upward slope over the last 2 weeks, but we're still well below the 200-day moving average and below the 20 and 50-day moving average. So until there is some serious momentum change in Ethereum, or it takes long enough that the moving average is renormalized down to that level, odds are we're going to stay within that range. So that's my 2 cents on it.
And I've already mentioned this a little bit earlier and yesterday as well. We went over it in detail. Ethereum and all risk assets, so anything below Bitcoin, is not going to get any sustained rally until at the very minimum we start rate cuts again. And we get certainty that inflation is remaining stable or heading down. Right? You need certainty and you need rate cuts to start again at the minimum in order for us to get any hope of a sustained altcoin rally. Otherwise, what's going to happen is alts will still bleed against Bitcoin. That's TLDR for the risk assets. Everything below Bitcoin, that's your TLDR, right? And I will hold that thesis until the risk assets change my mind, right?
Very true. Yeah, I mean,
you got to show me through price action, man.
That's
You
true.
got to
That's
show
true.
me through price action.
Until I think I'm in agreement with you, which is that until we actually get some QE or we get some rate cuts, we're not going to see a sustained altcoin rally. It's possible that you could see some spikes based on some news events that could happen. I don't really think that ETFs are in the car. ETF launches are in the cards for moving price too much at this point.
Nah.
The only ones currently out there is a proposed XRP ETF. There's a Doge ETF.
Solana
I think there was even a Litecoin ETF, Solana ETFs. And then outside of that, for the big two, there was a proposed hybrid Bitcoin Ethereum ETF. But even then, based on what we've seen off of the Ethereum ETF launch, I think that it's going to require a serious injection of capital in order to move the markets like we saw happen with the Bitcoin ETF. But that's going to require incentive. And I just don't know if the incentive is there just to launch the product and hope that people just flock to it, because there's already multiple products in the market now.
Yep.
One of them continues to be the dominant one. The other continues to lag behind greatly.
Yeah.
So I don't count on ETFs to really pump price. I think you are correct, which is that we're going to need some rate cuts. We're going to need some economic energy from outside of just trying to hope something shiny and new catches attention.
And don't get us wrong, man. The ETFs will pump price, but again, the key word is, can it be sustained? If you guys notice, this 4-year cycle is unique in that every single corrective structure that we've had for this entire 4-year cycle has been range bound in nature, right? Every single time risk assets have gone up, they've given back a ton of their gains, right? And it's going to be like that. Like, for example, when the Solana ETF comes out and that gives the altcoins a little bit of a push, I guarantee you that move is going to be short-lived and gains will be given back unless something changes. And nothing has changed yet, unfortunately, in terms of monetary policy. We're still higher for longer.
True. All right. Speaking of monetary policy, we do have one of our favorites here. How do I share this? There we go. Yeah. I need to change. Hold on one sec. All right. There we go. Now we have it corrected. Folks, we have our boy Jerome Powell before the Senate Banking Committee. Did a semi-annual testimony for his report, but I'll just let you hear from him himself. So here we go.
Member Warren and other members of the committee. Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Warren and other members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to present the Federal Reserve's semi-annual monetary policy report. The Federal Reserve remains squarely focused on achieving our dual mandate goals of maximum employment and stable prices for the benefit of the American people. The economy is strong overall and has made significant progress toward our goals over the past 2 years. Labor market conditions have cooled from their formerly overheated state and remain solid. Inflation has moved much closer to our 2% longer run goal, though it remains somewhat elevated. We are attentive to the risks on both sides of our mandate. I will review the current.
All right, there you go. Phase 1 complete. He's in front of Congress saying pretty much
The exact
everything that
same
we've
thing.
been saying the whole time over here, which is that inflation is better, but slightly up over the last 4 months. You've been paying attention to the year-over-year numbers, and the unemployment numbers have started to increase, but he believes that they are at a stable point that is an indicator of a good, healthy economy, right around that 4.0% unemployment level.
Yeah.
So, nothing new here, right?
No, sir. If you took every single opening speech from Jerome Powell for the past 2 years, it sounds exactly like that.
Yeah.
I was hoping that he'd come in and sit in front of Congress and give them something different. I guess I was I guess
It's
I was
optimistic.
wrong.
I appreciate that. I do. I will say this, though. Jerome Powell didn't bring anything new to this hearing, but Congress did what they do, and they said, oh, cool, we're in front of C-SPAN? Yeah, I'm going to ignore what's on the agenda and just try to make clips of whatever I want. So with that being said, let's talk about the topic of the day.
Is that a wise policy?
So I guess I ought to say this. I think the standard case for free trade and all that logically still makes sense. It didn't work that well when we have one very large country that doesn't really play by the rules. And in any case, it's not the Fed's job to make or comment on tariff policy. We, really that's for elected people, and it's not for us to comment. Ours is to try to react to it in a thoughtful, sensible way and make monetary policy so that we can achieve our mandate.
There you go, folks. All right. So the question there was, what do you think about Donald Trump's tariff policy, and how does it affect your decisions at the Fed? The answer from Jerome Powell is no comment. And we'll pay attention to it, but it's not a primary driver. So as of right now, a lot of the current hubbub in Congress is talking about all the executive actions and Doge coming in, making cuts, looking at things that need to be trimmed, shall we say, and also the proposal of tariffs as either a negotiating tool or a protectionism measure for the American economy to prevent the exportation of the manufacturing base and industry and stuff like that. So Jerome Powell obviously looks like he's a free markets kind of guy that doesn't take into account a lot of the populism arguments that we've been seeing in modern discourse lately, saying that if you actually are exporting or economic activity overseas, you are effectively eroding the culture in the United States because you're removing the manufacturing base that kind of inspires a lot of the activity around it. So if you remove the manufacturing base, you're also going to remove some of the support for consuming. Therefore, it will largely be sent elsewhere. Overall, though, I think this is pretty standard from Jerome, which is he's trying to stay out of it as much as he can. A lot of people are trying to pit him against Donald Trump, which honestly, I don't think they really have a whole lot of beef. If anything, I think Jerome Powell is just tired of being asked about it. That's my personal take.
Yeah, and he's given the exact same answer every single time reporters have asked him to comment on anything that Trump is doing, and that is no comment, right? So you got to give it to him. He is solely focused on taking care of his business, right? And the Federal Reserve acting independently of whatever the president wants, and he's pretty much stuck to his guns. After the last meeting, President Trump came out and said, "You made a mistake. You should cut rates." And Jerome Powell was like, "Nah, I'm gonna do my thing." Right. So it's like you have to give the man credit for having some integrity, because he's not going to be influenced by what Biden said, and certainly it doesn't seem like he's being influenced by what Donald Trump is saying or asking of him. Right. That might get him fired, but it's going to take a lot to get Jerome Powell fired, even with Trump, even if Trump doesn't like him.
That's true. I will say it is, even if you are of the mind that they probably should have cut rates or something like that, it is nice to see that he's withstanding pressure, not just from political appointees like the president, aka his boss, but also if you remember back when we had the carry trade fall through with Japan, there was a massive outcry from the market, from the pundits and all the experts saying, we need an emergency meeting, you got to emergency cut the rates, and he did not do anything. He is unshaken by both sides of the pressure. So in one sense, I personally think that is actually kind of comforting to see. It lets you know that you got a steady hand at the wheel, and I personally think that's a good thing. We can disagree with him over the numbers per se, but overall, I think it's a pretty darn good thing. Real quick, we do have somebody backstage that's trying to break in. Mr. Tracker, how we doing, buddy?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, you guys can shame me later for being late, so I apologize. You guys can harass me pretty hard after we get off camera. Sorry, gentlemen. So I'm just going to jump in where I can at this point because, like I said, I'm coming late to the party. So what are we talking about right now? Obviously, the Fed, Trump administration, digital finance, the digital committee, I'm assuming.
I have one more clip before we can transition out of this topic and move on to our last one. So the other majority of the discourse from hearing was about the CFPB, or the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, aka something designed to regulate moneylenders, but the effect is arguable. This is a lot of the reaction to Donald Trump and Elon Musk actually pretty much freezing up the vast majority, if not all of the funds over at the CFPB, and we will explain why they were able to do that a little bit later. But for now, this is actually from one of the creators of the CFPB, Elizabeth Warren herself. So let's hear what she has to say.
If the CFPB is not there examining these giant banks to make sure they are following the laws on not cheating consumers, who is doing that job?
I can say no other federal regulator.
No one. I just want to make a point before we quit here, and that is about law enforcement. If you keep the laws the same on the books, but you fire the cops, you're going to have a lot more crime. That's kind of law enforcement 101. And the problem we've got right now is law in the books about consumer protection hasn't changed. But the cops at least right at this moment, have been told at CFPB to stand down. And I appreciate that we have state AGs who step in, and often they partner up with the CFPB. But there is no one else for the giant banks who actually does what's called the bank examination, the supervision.
Well, there you go. Elizabeth Warren saying, oh no, the CFPB, there's no one else out there that could possibly do this except for the SEC, the CFTC, the FDIC, the Federal Reserve themselves actually has some sort of regulation power as well. So I personally slightly disagree and say this is a bit of a disingenuous take, but this is the hot ticket item of the day. Gentlemen, is this a nothing burger? Did we drag Jerome Powell out here just to yell at him or yell at a camera through him? What's going on here?
I think it was a little grandstanding.
Yeah.
Like the politicians, they see the red light on that C-SPAN camera and they just say, "Oh boy, now's my time. Hold my beer."
It's just hilarious to me that out of all the people to make that damn statement, it's Elizabeth Warren about how who's gonna help consumers if you take out the cops. Yeah, Miss Defund the Police. Man,
there's a great irony to that.
It just, whenever I hear her speak and hear all of the hypocrisy that comes out of her mouth, it just makes my blood boil. So that's my comment on her. When I heard her say that, I was like, oh my goodness, what did you spend the entirety of 2022 and 2023 trying to do to our police force, man, to our military? I remember when they were trying to send the National Guard over to Portland, Oregon, because it was being burned into the ground. And these people are like, nah, man, don't do it. Police brutality. It's like, it just makes me upset listening to that woman speak.
Wild times, man. Wild times.
The Portland, Oregon thing was very interesting. Like that, it was truly like, what would happen if you just let everybody do whatever they wanted to do? And that was a good example of what would happen. I mean, it was
a great case study.
It really was. It was something like out of a movie, basically. You know, I mean, it was like Escape from New York, the 1980s movie.
Track, you know what was so hilarious? I think it was one of their state representatives, right? It was either the governor or senator. They were residing in Portland, Oregon, and obviously capitulating to the whole defund the police narrative, right? Mm-hmm. His own constituents chased him down.
Hey, man, there's a little bit of justice there in that sense. You know, you did create this. Now the mob's going to turn on you. Now, as far as Elizabeth Warren, yes, anytime these politicians get their opportunity to speak, they've got to make it really hit home, because those are their plugs, those are their clips that they can then give to the masses for their votes and stuff. So they have to grandstand when they get those opportunities. She's doing exactly that. We already know where Elizabeth Warren stands. She stands heavily with the banks. With every move that she's ever done is heavily with the banks. And as far as going into the whole regulations of the banks, how has that gone over the last 50 years? I mean, come on, don't even get me started. Dude, the LIBOR scandal, you know, if people aren't familiar with the LIBOR scandal in 2012, the LIBOR scandal showed you how corrupt the entire financial institution was. It was clearly caught with their hands in the cookie jar. The LIBOR sets the rates for the whole world and what we trade on. That's the LIBOR out of England sets. They come to find out that was the one of the major cruxes. That was a huge rigging going on, where it's supposed to be closed bids, but yet the people that were involved in the negotiations were telling that certain people, if they wanted to get in the bid, hey, you got to come up a couple quarter points, come up here, come here. They literally were telling their constituents how much they had to come up to get the rate. So this count came out. I think 2 or 3 men went to jail out of the entire LIBOR process. That was the only people who went to jail out of the whole LIBOR scandal. If you're not familiar with it, I would highly recommend go look at it, because it's just one incredible example of how many billions of dollars we're talking about that gets moved around, and these companies set aside major stashes, so when they get slapped on the wrist, they've got the money already ready to go. No different than the pharmaceutical companies and any other big corporations. So you can put all the regulations you want in place, but unless you really come down on them hard, then it's going to keep happening. The return on investment is much greater, and it's worth the risk. That's why they're going to do this. And until you make it the opposite or inverse of that, it's going to keep occurring. So what she's saying, I agree, but there's no justice on, regardless of who's regulating who. It's not been happening. It's not coming to fruition. The consumer certainly is not being protected here on any of this matter, period. I don't care what alphabet agency is involved. It's just an overpaid, bloated system, alphabet companies that are in place that don't really do their jobs. And it's basically, it's all theater, like everything. It's all theater. Like, hey, we're here to do the job. We're here to bust a few people to show you that we're doing our jobs. But in reality, they're still letting people skate around doing things that they're clearly aware of. Good Lord. I mean, if we didn't learn anything out of the FTX scandal, I mean, that alone was just another example of this things happen without, people being aware of it, but nothing seems to come to justice on it. So yeah, I agree with her statement, but she's full of it. She's grandstanding.
I'll put it this way. There's a reason why I'm pulling this clip for what appears to be largely irrelevant to Jerome Powell, who's at the Federal Reserve. So why is Congress yelling at the Federal Reserve about the CFPB? Well, the answer to that is because it's similar to a lot of the other stuff going on right now, which is that over the last 20 years, the powers of the federal government has been largely expanded to 3-letter agencies. And, well, this now 4-letter agency, the CFPB, seems like it might be in a similar vein. However, if you actually dive into the details, the CFPB was designed and created to be largely independent of congressional oversight. There's a single director who can be fired for cause, but outside of that, there's no congressional oversight because they don't actually pull money from Congress. They pull it from, can you guess? The Federal Reserve. So the CFPB works hand in hand with the Federal Reserve to accomplish their mission statement. But there have actually been cases in the past where they've overstepped their authority in a lot of people's opinions, and they tried to do things that were not originally in their scope. What I'm referring to specifically is that they are here to regulate lenders, but through the last administration, they actually tried to use the CFPB to regulate auto sellers, the dealers, so to speak. They were trying to hit dealers and regulate them for trying to add on what they thought were exorbitant fees or add-ons or things that were just unnecessary fluff. So you ask yourself, how is a organization designed to regulate lenders trying to regulate what auto dealers can and can't do? Well, they did it by going after the people that got loans for cars and the auto dealerships themselves. So it's stuff like that. The issue at hand here is that the CFPB is an organization that was created to be largely independent of Congress and really only accountable to the president. Well, now that the president is someone that a lot of people in Congress don't like, and he's actually starting to, stop the agency from overstepping, aka pretty much their entire job, that's where you get a lot of the pushback, and people are claiming that, oh no, the lenders are going to start scamming people again. It's like, no, I personally disagree. We already have a lot of other bodies and a lot of other 3-letter agencies, like Tracker mentioned previously, that are responsible for protecting consumers and are actually a little bit more accountable to Congress, even though I personally still do believe that the bureaucratic state is a little bit out of control. So there you go. That's how we tie this whole thing full circle. We say that Jerome Powell comes before Congress. Congress yells at Jerome Powell about the CFPB, and the CFPB is tied in there because they receive their dollars to pay people back from the Federal Reserve, not from Congress. So that's why they're yelling at him about it. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it makes sense. Right. I just hear a lot of bloat and it's just basically full circle. I mean, it's just a bunch of silliness.
Yeah. I mean,
if people were doing their jobs correctly, we wouldn't be having the problems we have. The problem is there's biased entities and there's too many people trying to preserve their own positions and power. That's basically what it is. Whatever I need to do to stay in power, that's what I'm going to do, regardless if it's necessary, moral or not. And that's the sad part.
Yeah, hell of a drug. But what do you?
Hey, Zenith. On a side note, well, it kind of talks about what we're talking about a little bit. I was just curious to get your take on this. The House Financial Service Committee met last week. I know, Jay, you threw it out there. I listened to them. One thing that jumped out to me, once again, a lot of grandstanding, people just putting out their 2 cents. That one was strictly around borderless payments using stable coins for, like I said, payments and money of transfer outside of the borders, right? To try to bypass, look at if that was something viable for people and consumers that would be more less taxing on the consumer, unlike a wire transfer, as well as time, much quicker. So they're actually looking at, that's what that main focus was about. One thing did come up though, Mr. Kasten, came up and was stating, he went down this whole path about, shit coins and talking about the Haktui coin. I mean, just going down the road, but follow his logic. He gets down to Donald Trump's and their coin and how they rugged it. And he wanted to try to roll that somehow into, do we think this is a violation of the emoluments clause, right?
The emoluments clause.
Emoluments clause. Thank you for, yes. About basic.
Go for it.
Constitution that generally prohibits federal office holders from receiving any gifts, payments, or any other things of value from a foreign state or its rules, officers, or representatives without the consent of Congress. So the fact they're saying it's kind of a stretch, but they're saying that, hey, you got this coin out here, you've received funds potentially from international folks and people all over. How is that allowed? So it's a stretch, but it was an interesting theory that he was throwing out there.
It's definitely a viable theory. I'll say that much. So the idea is that you can't just straight up have the president be making money off ventures in like China when we're explicitly in a trade war with China. That would be a perverse incentive and kind of a gaming of the system, and you'd effectively be using the US government to help yourself out. This case is an interesting one, though, because crypto is effectively an international or an anywhere market because it exists nowhere, or rather in cyberspace. So because of that, it means that there's no restrictions on who can get on, who can buy, who can sell, that kind of thing. So the question at hand is, does that qualify as a foreign purchase or a foreign donation or foreign benefit to someone in office? I personally lean more towards the idea that no, it's not. But at the same time, if you're being blatantly obvious about it and you're just using it as just a straight up shell game with a foreign country, it could be. I mean, for any fans of Tim Pool out there, he's talked about how in the DC casinos, there's sometimes how they just straight up give money to people through gambling losses. And what they do is they'll just like play poker against each other, and then they'll just like
That's
purposely
hilarious.
win or purposely make bad bets. And then they're like, oh no, it was above table. It's on camera too. It's like if you're trying to do something like that with crypto, which is that you just launch a terrible, like blatantly obvious project, and then there is one wallet or maybe a handful of wallets that all tie back to a single wallet that just effectively transfer all of their money over to you and then immediately just rug the system and pull liquidity. Yeah, something like that could be it. I think the way that the Donald Trump meme coin token launched is not that. I just think it's a pretty standard meme coin launch, which is that it had a large initial pump, there were some profits taken, and since then it's been largely down and to the right. It has shown some signs of life and the ability to pump up a little bit here and there, but still, yeah, largely down and to the right. As far as the actual legal question, does that is that effectively a foreign contribution? I personally think no in this case, and I think that I understand the argument, but I think it's a bit of a stretch.
Well, then he goes further. Think about it. So you had the World Liberty Financial, right? And they have that coin that they've got out there, and you can donate money from it. So essentially, could it come back and be a big stink? It should. But once again, I think if anything, I made a joke in the comments saying like, well, you guys can thank World Liberty Financial for basically exploiting an error to the government that needs to basically, maybe address it if they feel so inclined to go after it. They're just basically using this as a great example to show you where the holes are.
Alrighty. Any final thoughts? Or are we ready to? What are we feeling? How are we doing on time, gentlemen?
I mean, we're right at 9. It's up to you guys. I mean, I was late to the party, so.
Well, let's go over some of the hex stuff. It is in the title. It'd be kind of.
Yeah, I know. I was sitting there thinking to myself, oh gosh, I might just have to change the title and the thumbnail to something else, and I'll do the meme of the lady yelling at the person over dinner on the other side of the table. It's the cat, but just replace that with Jerome Powell, and then put Elizabeth Warren as the one yelling. You broke the CFPP. He's like, what did I do? All right, so let's talk about HEX and Pulsechain. We wanted to cover this as a quick get everyone up to speed who does not understand what's going on here and give you a little bit of why we like it and why we think it's a good project. Spoiler, I think all three of us hold at least some amount of HEX, Pulsechain, or any of the Richard Hart ecosystem coins, which we will get into, by the way.
Yes, full disclosure. Yes.
Exactly. There you go. So back in December of 2019, Richard Hart launched a project called HEX. It originally was supposed to be for Bitcoin, but it was launched on the Ethereum network. What the original idea here was that it is a high interest blockchain time deposit, aka kind of a certificate of deposit effectively, which is that there is a token. it inflates at 3.69% every year. And that inflation is distributed to the people that are currently staking the token and have it locked up for a certain amount of time. If you wish to unlock it, there's going to be certain penalties and fees associated with it. Primarily, if you try to unstake your stake before it is matured halfway through the time that you promised to stake it up, you will receive nothing. After that, you'll start to receive up to your full amount the closer you get to your end stake day. Also, additionally, you have to unstake properly at the correct time. Otherwise, you're going to also face late fees at the end of it as well. So initially, this was launched in 2019, and there was this thing called Big Payday. It was an incentive to get people to stake early. So for the first 100 days, what it was is if you look at the chart, it goes up and to the right pretty heavily for supply, meaning that the tokens are being distributed rapidly. And then after that, the incentive to stake dropped drastically because the big payday had happened and no one had the incentive to stake. Therefore, a lot of people unstaked, and that created kind of the first ripple in the system. Outside of that, though, the system operated pretty much effectively and flawlessly. The technology and the on-chain side of it worked very, very well. And the real next big item that we have on the timeline is when you get to 2021. I believe it was September of 2021, right along in coinciding with the Bitcoin all-time high. HEX hit a high of 51 cents. Keep in mind, it launched somewhere down near like 1/100th of a penny. So the X's were massive, and the big claim to fame here was that HEX did a 10,000X, it was called. Then since then, the token has not been able to hit a all-time high past 51 cents. In fact, I don't think it's even gotten past 15 cents, if I'm not mistaken. So
yeah,
there's that.
The 2023 high was about 12 cents, give or take.
That's about right. So there's a high in 2023. For those fans of the 4-year cycle out there, you'll be asking yourselves, wait a minute, that's not in line with the 4-year cycle. What the heck happened? Well, you see, HEX was phase 1. Phase 2 was Pulsechain. Pulsechain was a proposed layer 1 blockchain by Richard Hart, same guy that launched HEX, as a fork of Ethereum that was designed to be faster, cleaner, and more efficient and less energy dependent. So it was supposed to inflate less and destroy the economy less and have better technology, faster throughput, cheaper gas fees, because at the same time, one of the ways that you use gas fees for the HEX on Ethereum is that you have to use a gas fee for every day that your HEX was staked to do the calculations based on the amount of your T-shares, of your percentage of the stake pool and how much you get out of the inflation. It's a lot of calculation. And when Ethereum ran up and got its all-time high back in 2021, the end stake fee got very, very, very expensive. So Pulsechain was launched as an alternative to Ethereum to help make HEX better by making faster throughput, cheaper gas fees, so that your calculations are easier to do and your calculations cost less for ending your HEX stakes. At the same time, though, Pulsechain was a fork of Ethereum. What that means is they literally just did a snapshot. They took all of the data on Ethereum, copied it over, and said, cool, this is our data now. It is now its own thing that's going to run independently. But even before that, we had to figure out, okay, do people want this thing? And that is where we get the Pulsechain sacrifice. So back in 2022, there was a sacrifice phase for Pulsechain where people were able to sacrifice for freedom of speech, it was. And based on how much people sacrificed, Richard Hart rewarded them with an allocation of initial Pulsechain supply. Additionally, there was another project launched on Pulsechain as the decentralized exchange of the chain called PulseX, which would have its own token, its own sacrifice, and the decentralized exchange would reward people in this thing called incentive token, which was pretty much just the offput or the output of whatever the people on PulseX were staking. It created this token that was given to the people farming PulseX, or farming or liquidity providing on PulseX, as a way to reward those people. Yeah. So let's fast forward back to 2023. We now have Pulsechain is online. There's a copy of HEX called PHEX. The original HEX on Ethereum, still very much alive and well and very active and usable at the same time. We have PulseX, which is the decentralized exchange on Pulsechain, has its own token, has its own feature, notably a buy and burn feature, which is that whenever you use the decentralized exchange, the PulseX token is bought and burned to help price appreciate. Incentive token is also created as the reward to help get people to stake their tokens on PulseX to create the liquidity pools necessary for a decentralized exchange to get it going. So there you go. We're in 2023. We have EHEX, PHEX, PulseX, and incentive token. Now let's keep it going. we start to get to where we are now, which is a lot more people are launching projects, launching coins, and we have a what I would call a thriving ecosystem, which there are lending platforms, there are GameFi platforms, there are meme coins, and there's even people creating their own wallets specifically optimized for Pulsechain. That is the internet money wallet that I'm talking about.
You also got NFTs now.
And there's also NFT marketplaces as well. So there you go. We originally started out with HEX back in 2019 as a certificate of deposit over on Ethereum. We now have an entirely new layer 1 that, by the way, is proof of stake, not proof of work. They actually proposed the idea before Ethereum switched over to the proof of stake idea because they were still on proof of work. When the sacrifices happened, Ethereum did switch over to proof of stake in September of 2023 or 2022. I want to say 2022.
22.
22. Thank you. Yeah. So it did technically switch to proof of stake before Pulsechain did. So Pulsechain couldn't claim that one. But yeah, outside of that though, the fundamentals are that there was initial airdrops for HEX back in the day for Bitcoin holders, or the largest Bitcoin holders, to try to generate interest and attraction. Outside of that though, the only other airdrop was the Pulsechain launch, where they just straight forked Ethereum. So every token or everything that was on Ethereum does exist on Pulsechain. It might not have the same functionality. However, if you holding a wallet, having an address and your own private keys, if you just go add Pulsechain to the MetaMask or whatever you use to track that stuff, you will see an exact one-to-one copy of all the stuff over there. Again, it comes down to whether or not it is supported on Pulsechain. Some of the projects are, some of them are not. Some of them are a weird kind of bastardization where it's like this thing was a stable coin, but it doesn't actually hold the stablecoin value over here, which means that it's depegged from whatever it was. I'm specifically looking at UPDI and all the other P stables like PUSDC and T. People actually trade those things down, and those prices move up and down. And it is, in my personal opinion, some of the purest market dynamics and market psychology in effect, because there's nothing in it outside of just pure market forces of you putting in or pulling out money in conjunction with the rest of the market. All right. I've been talking long enough. Gentlemen, did I miss anything on the history before we get into the pros and cons of this system?
No, sir.
No, I think you nailed all the high points. I think you got it all. I mean, there's a lot of stories in between, but yeah, I think you nailed the high stuff. Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot.
I am the legal guy that has been covering this whole thing, and I've not even mentioned the SEC and what they've done to their pursuit of Richard Hart for what I believe is
big ticket items. Yeah.
So, gentlemen, let me ask you the question. Why do you think that these tokens and this ecosystem is worthwhile for investors? What is the draw? Why should people care?
I think people should care because everything that, at least the core coins, right, and the thesis behind Pulsechain is well in line with the spirit of crypto, right? At least the spirit of the vision of Satoshi, right? And that we take custody of our own money, in this case, our own assets, right? You remove the middleman, which means you remove the counterparty risk, and you basically achieve 100% self-sovereignty, at least in terms of your own finances, right? And I think people should care about Pulsechain and the ethos behind it because it does give you that type of sovereignty, right? There's no middleman. You hold all of your own assets. And I think personally that's the way to go, right? Because when you take away the counterparty risk, right? In this case, keeping your money on a centralized exchange, for example, you also insulate yourself from the risks associated by having somebody else handle your money, right? I think people are going to be fairly aware of what happened at the very beginning of 2023 when we had some of those collapses of the smaller banks, right? People were lining up around Silicon Valley Bank trying to get their money out, but there was a notice right on the front door saying, sorry, we can't help you. And when things like that happen, it makes it that much more apparent just exactly how valuable the value proposition of Pulsechain is. So I think that's one of the primary reasons why people should pay attention to it. Obviously, in addition to the fact that in order for you, or your ability to transact on Pulsechain is not going to be deterred by how expensive the fees you're paying are because of the gas, right? How slow the network is, how congested the network can become. Now, obviously, those things might become an issue in the future, right? With scale comes new problems, but that's yet to be determined, right? But I think primarily, if I were to make one one pitch for Pulsechain, is that it is well in line with the spirit of crypto, that Richard and obviously Satoshi had in mind.
Well said, sir. Tracker, what do you got? Why do you like these tokens in this ecosystem?
All right, all right, there's a lot of things here, and I'll go through them. Solid leader, massive community, a community, whether or not we agree or disagree, everyone's IQ is typically high with a lot of the intelligent conversations. This community tends to also be very ahead of the game, plugged into regulations, understands the tokenomics, understands how to build proper software. Are there scammers out there? Are there rug pulls or meme coins? 100%. But the core essence of the community and the people who have been here since day one, or even been here since before Pulsechain, understands it, and they're very intelligent community. Now let's look at Richard. Richard he's full disclosure. He's always stated what his history was. He's at, like, I think, car audio company. Then he went to another company, and he's always disclosed everything that he has done. Whatever he says whatever he says he will do, he does. He also, when being case in point, if he wanted to rug, people always say the leader could rug or destroy this company. He's had so many opportunities to rug if he wanted to. He could have rugged on Big Payday, or before Big Payday. He could have rugged when he launched HEX. He could have launched when everybody sacrificed for Pulse or PulseX, or when he raised money for the Sounds Foundation. I mean, he could have rugged at any of these moments in time. And yet, when you look at all of his wallets, or people who really watch his wallets, all the funds are always there. He hasn't done anything. Now, we always assume Richard is the OA. Well, the OA, every time it makes moves, it's always in benefit for the community. So I constantly see a track record where the OA is protecting everybody who's invested in these coins. In case in point, the recent move over, like, we can get into all those, but there's a lot of actions that have gone from, buying Ethereum to staking HEX, all these things that are very bullish to try to support the community, and tried to also remove bad actors from the community itself. That's one. Once again, I've already talked about the community being strong. That's another two. The actions that the OA does help support the coins itself. Going back, I don't want to piggyback on what Jay's already articulated very well about true essence of what Bitcoin was, peer-to-peer lending and everything. And the products that RH and his developers have created are reflective of that. Case in point, when you go out to fully decentralized. Now, when you go out and you launch, say, the HEX staking app, or go to PulseX, or go to any of these other interfaces, anybody can run these from your local desktop. Anybody can go anywhere it is fully decentralized. If RH died today, or anybody died, or anybody in developer, it would still be up, still running. Nothing stops. And because of that, RH is always challenging the community to go out there and do stuff. Well, this community has built a lot of things. Alex, who built Hedron and Icosa, we talked about briefly, and his developers blessed it. That's just one example. And some people have had debates on liquid loans. Personally, I think liquid loans is a solid product. It's got the most money staked into on the liquidity. It's been proven to work. I know there were some arguments, people just debating on the whole, what is it, ending people's vaults. Getting, there's some debate on that and how that would, on the percentage of and I get that, but they've been very open to disclose it. I think, once again, the reason I'm bringing this up is the community is now building good products. This thing is thriving. There's so many influencers. The community is strong, even through all of the being. And this is going to sound conspiracy theories there, but the community has been blacklisted for a long time, not allowed to be on any central exchanges. Not, anytime we'd show up on Coinbase, they'd mess up the algorithm, and HEX would jump to the top of the top 10 and all of a sudden magically disappear again. I mean, it's like, but on other platforms like Coin Peperico, we were all the way up number 3 or 4 on the market cap. So I think this community is truly, like Jay said, it is truly decentralized, and it is truly trying to keep on that peer-to-peer. But everybody should understand, crypto is very much gate kept. very much so. All the big central exchanges gatekeep. The big institutions are gatekeeping, the VCs, all the governments are entitled are gatekeeping, and this is kind of an area that they don't quite know how to do. Like the SEC trying to come after Richard, he doesn't own anything. It's fully decentralized. So I know I'm rambling on with a lot of things, but there's so many talking points here that bottom line, the bluff is this: the leader does what he says he's going to do. He's trying to challenge people and make them more intelligent. When RH came on, when he was debating everybody, he would crush anybody he was debating. At one point, he was debating some hardcore Bitcoin maxis, and there was one gentleman in particular. All of a sudden, before we knew it, he was now debating 5 different guys on the stream. He also went after Peter Schiff, the big gold bug. He went after him and debated him. He's been on a couple financial shows online that are very well done, and I'd like to see him out there more. I think if people were willing to give RH the chance to talk on these things, they'd understand how articulate he is, how intelligent he is, and how if you truly just listen to what he's telling you, you would understand why everybody is so passionate about the community, for all the other reasons I stated as well.
That's fair.
So
I'll come in here real quick and give us a quick. Those are all excellent points, and I think it's a good segue into what I think is one of the drawbacks of the ecosystem, and that is that Richard Hart is a bit of a polarizing figure amongst the rest of the founders of other cryptocurrencies and other blockchains inside of the space. A lot of what Tracker's saying there is absolutely true, which is that he's very sharp and able to debate people, but at the same time, understand he has a bit of a confrontational attitude with certain things, and he's absolutely rubbed people the wrong way, either by maybe making them look foolish on stream, or just refusing to play ball and do kind of kickbacks or weird stuff with other founders and large institutions to incentivize them to come into the space and utilize his project. So notably, one of the points that Tracker talked about is that if you go over on CoinGecko, I believe, is the one, they will not list HEX up where it should be. It is deranked. It is not showing accurate data about where it falls amongst the ranking of other tokens inside of the space. Stuff like that. Additionally, centralized exchanges refuse to carry HEX and allow people to purchase on it, and they give a myriad of reasons. Currently, the number one reason that a lot of people are giving for refusing to hold HEX on their exchange and allow people to interact with it is that it is under investigation, or indictment rather, by the SEC for being a unregulated security launch, and then also claiming that the sacrifice phase, or the money that was collected during the sacrifice, was fraudulently collected and is misappropriation of investor funds. All of which we've covered over on DGen Roundtable. I personally believe that those arguments are very much moot. A, they don't have jurisdiction over Richard Hart or the Pulsechain product or HEX or PulseX. B, none of it was fraud because the guy said exactly what he was going to do. It's just a misinterpretation of the Howey test to determine what is a security. And then also a misinterpretation of what is fraud, because they're saying that the money collected is now in the hands of you, and you have a fiduciary duty to the investors to use that funds to help make them better. That is exactly the opposite of everything that was advertised for the launch. But at this time, it is currently being litigated in the Second Circuit Court in New York City. And we are currently awaiting a result of the motion to dismiss from Richard Hart's legal team against the SEC. And this is all before Donald Trump was elected and Gary Gensler left the SEC, because a lot of this was at the behest of Gary Gensler and his approach to do regulation through enforcement. Okay, so there's the negative, which is that other founders don't like him. They try to blacklist him, and that he's currently under the project is currently under indictment by the SEC, or the last SEC, who also was notable for suing anyone and everyone they could possibly get their hands on. That is the con. Here's my pro for why I personally like these products. I like HEX. I think it's simple, and I think it's efficient, and it creates good incentives, which is that you want to incentivize people and reward them for staking or locking up their funds for a extended amount of time. You do this either through the two bonuses. Bigger pays better, which is that the more of it you lock up, you get rewarded for it. But more importantly, the much bigger bonus is the longer pays better, which is that the longer you stake for and you're able to hold your stake, the greater your reward is, almost up to effectively triple your initial investment when it comes to raw number of tokens. That's what I like about this. It effectively takes the certificate of deposit, which is the second most popular financial product at your local bank, and it does it in a clean, crisp way on blockchain, and I think it's a fantastic tool for getting people on board. Now, Pulsechain was created to make HEX better. It was created to make the original product better by having faster throughput, lower gas fees, so that your end state calculations are more efficient and cheaper, so it costs you less money to get your own money back out of the system. Right now, Ethereum does not have a gas fee problem currently, but it does still have the calculation issues, so it could potentially be a little more expensive, but as it stands right now, gas fees on Ethereum are low, and allegedly they will get lower at some point in the future. But should the Ethereum price really run up again and the network gets busy again, we're going to go right back to that issue. So Pulsechain was created to make HEX better, and everything else on Pulsechain was there to help make sure that Pulsechain is a success so that HEX can also remain a viable product in a thriving ecosystem. I like PulseX. I like the buy and burn function. It was one of the first buy and burn functions out there, and a lot of other people have tried copying that formula and tried using that exact same thing as an incentive to help price of tokens appreciate. Additionally, the incentive token, we don't really know what it's for yet. It's kind of what effectively is called a meme coin by the community, not because it itself is a meme, but because it just doesn't have a function case. It literally is just the value that people say it is and what they trade it for on the open market to determine what the APRs are for the farms over on PulseX. Outside of that, the community is a massive draw. Obviously, the three of us are here trying to stream, talk to you guys. A lot of streamers in space were inspired by Richard Hart, who was a streamer himself, and encouraged many other people to be streamers to help foster community and get the word out there about the new financial product, not because it requires some multi-level marketing scheme to get it going, but rather because of all the other content we talked about before. Some of the bigger players weren't given their Richard Hart refused to kowtow to them or bend down or give them kickbacks of certain sorts, so they're a little peeved about it, which means it's got to be grassroots, which, if done successfully, is another major plus because it means a more stable ecosystem, a more thriving ecosystem, and it gives a lot more confidence to investors inside of the ecosystem itself. So there you go. I know that's supposed to be simple, but I rambled a bit myself. We all have a tendency to do that when talking about this kind of stuff. So there you go. Gentlemen, did I miss anything?
I like to go off what you said, Zenith. I like to go off piggyback off some things you said there. All right. So, for example, the products that they make are also pretty rock solid. That the developer, Richard, and his development team created have been great. Their products were always good.
My friend, you were coming in and out.
The HEX ecosystem never went down. Sorry, guys. Hopefully I'm back. All right. Sorry about that. So their products were always stable. They're unlike my connection, obviously. Am I still here or no?
Yes.
Yeah, you're there. You're there.
Are we good or no?
Yes.
So the products that they make are stable. Pulsechain has never gone down. It's been up and operational. There's been no issues there. It's also one of the most active networks currently with daily trading. I mean, today it's $32 million worth of trading just on Pulsechain alone. Pretty active for amongst all the other ones. Now, is it up there with Ethereum? No. You know, some of the other big ones, no. But it's still highly active, very active for a community. It's still, there's not an easy way to on-ramp. You have to bridge in to be able to get in. Yes, they're working on it, but even then, it's still got pretty good activity. So it's got a lot of life in there, considering how much it's been suppressed. The one thing that rubbed a lot of people wrong, I wish that RH never did, was the shock marketing. I think that really put him back. I know why he did it, but because of it, I think has closed doors on opportunities for him to promote on a much larger traditional finance markets and shows where he could actually get out there and talk about it, but he's been now blocked because of that shock marketing. So that was something I think was a mistake. Personally, I wish he never did that, but I think a lot of people feel the same way. But outside of that, everything else has been going fairly well. It should be an interesting year, to say the least. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of piggyback off that the products are solid. They're clean. They work. They're not expensive to trade on. Everything, like I said, everything that was stated, it's pretty much lived up to it.
I guess the best way I could try to summarize it for people is like, if you like Ethereum, Pulsechain is very much like Ethereum, but without a lot of the drawbacks that Ethereum has, whether it's the foundation, whether it's the network busyness, whether it's the amount of L2s and the issues with bridges that they have, whether it's the gas fees that can run up on you. Pulsechain has solved a lot of those issues. And so, again, if you like Ethereum, odds are you're probably going to like Pulsechain, assuming that your favorite projects are on there. But if not, well, talk to the people over on Ethereum running them and let them know that it's probably very easy to get it going up on Pulsechain, and they might be able to reap some good benefits out of it.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, outside of that, any final thoughts on our quick run through of Pulsechain and HEX?
No, sir.
Just that
It's
RH
just,
made a comment a long time ago. Go ahead, Jay. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, I know people are getting a bit antsy because prices are still depressed. But look, if I were to make a comparison, this might not be a comparison that people would like. But remember that when XRP was involved in the litigation with the SEC, every single pump that they had was given back until it wasn't, until the case was resolved. And so I think we're probably going to get the same kind of result once everything has been resolved on the litigation between Richard Hart and the Securities and Exchange Commission, right? After that's over and done with, I think the pump is going to be able to be sustained, and then we go up into the right. But until then, I think just be patient, because this is not the first time something like this has happened in crypto. It won't be the last, and believe me, it's not going to this ecosystem is not going to be depressed to the degree that it has been forever, because the value proposition here is something that I think the rest of the market is going to be able to see and appreciate. It's just a matter of time.
To give context to Jay's reference there, XRP 5x'd over the course of a month after their court case was resolved.
And didn't give it back.
Mm-hmm. Questions, Ian. When is when is it going to be resolved? When are we going to have the outcome of this case? Because it feels like when they had it on Halloween, right? The judge, was basically looking at the case and like, I don't see a lot here. Like, what exactly are you guys trying to say he's doing wrong? Like, she basically felt like it was a big nothing burger. Now, and everybody felt that way when the court case let out of that. And Zenith, you were there, so I'd like to hear your take on it. But it also stated it was going to be about 90 days after that. Here we are. So it feels like this is still lingering. Of course, Trump and stepped in with the SEC. Everybody's supposed to be dropping all cases coming from the administration directly to the SEC. And they have a new, basically almost like the SEC is not allowed to go after anybody until it's been cleared. Almost like you have to get a warrant first before you can go after somebody, essentially. So what's the latest on the court case, and where do we stand currently?
Well, the latest is that there is no updates ever since pretty much the oral arguments that happened in New York City on Halloween. So what's been going on with the case is that the SEC had their initial complaint. Since then, Richard Hart hired a legal team. Their legal team has submitted a motion to dismiss. There's been some back and forth with legal documents citing reasons for their dismissal. At this stage in the game, they're not arguing the facts brought to the table. What they're arguing is whether or not the SEC has enough to continue their pursuit in an attempt that would be worthwhile to the court or anyone else that gets wrapped up trying to adjudicate this thing. The arguments made at the motion to dismiss oral arguments in October 31st of 2024. I think they were very strong, and they showed that the SEC was kind of grasping at things. Notably, their timeline was completely off. Their jurisdiction is flimsy at best and absolutely downright the previous arguments that the SEC has used in other cases actually go against everything they're trying to argue for when it comes to jurisdiction in this one. When it comes to what we should be expecting is, unfortunately, it's kind of at the discretion of the judge, which is Amon Carroll over in New York City. The Second Circuit is notably a rather busy court over there. And at the same time, though, she has no obligation to carry this through at any specific time outside of something that is reasonable, shall we say. So notably, you did give the 90-day figure. That is pretty standard for cases, but also keep in mind, it happened in beginning of November, effectively. So they had all of November, all of December, January, and here we are. You might remember that in November, December, and January, those were kind of busy and critical months when it comes to both the federal workers and also the political appointments going on, which is that November is famous for the Thanksgiving curse, December is eaten up by the holiday season and Christmas and all the other stuff going on, and New Year's. And then January, we had an election year. So incoming administration, new folks, new changes, new confirmations. For Paul Atkins is still not even confirmed at the head of the SEC currently. So we're still waiting on that one. And unfortunately, waiting is the name of the game right now. The motion to dismiss is pretty strong, but also keep in mind motions to dismiss don't have a super high track rate of being granted. Talking to our good friend Nuclear Herbs, he's a lawyer and covering this stuff extensively. In his opinion, the historical trend shows that motions to dismiss have about a 10% chance of being granted. After discussing with him extensively on this one, we feel it's at least up towards that 50% mark because a lot of the evidence was rather damning to the SEC's case.
Mm-hmm.
So that is where we're at right now. It looks good, but at the same time, still waiting, and you're not going to get any news until there is news. So, yeah. How's that for a splash of cold water for you?
Okay, so basically, there could be something announced tomorrow, or it could be announced in 6 months from now. We have no idea.
6 months might be a bit aggressive, but yes, we could get something tomorrow. We could get something in a month or two. That seems about the right time.
Month or two? Okay, Roger.
Yeah. There's another piece of this puzzle going on, though, which is that, remember, the original complaint and the accusations come from the SEC. This is a civil matter, meaning that the SEC is the one pursuing this. One of the things we talked about is that Gary Gensler overly sued people during his administration. He's no longer there. Therefore, when Paul Atkins come in, one of the things they've talked about openly is the idea that they're going to have to reevaluate all their open cases and determine whether or not they are continue pursuing. What that means is that there's three possible outcomes. A, continue pursuing. B, drop it entirely. Or C, try to find some sort of quick settlement that will help just get things going and out of the way. So those are the possible options right now from the SEC side of the house. From the court side of the house, we're waiting for the motion to dismiss to be adjudicated. And then after that, it could potentially go to a bench trial if it was not granted, the motion.
Nice. I'm glad you cleared that up very well. Yeah, so I knew we were waiting. I just didn't know if there was anything that so 1 to 2 months was what we're looking at roughly. It seems realistic. Okay. And you're right. Nuclear Herbs has been all over this, and you guys have had some really good discussions around it, which has been really good to listen to. Okay. So it's a waiting game.
Yep.
But I mean, everything points in the right direction. Obviously, a curveball could be thrown our way, sure. But I think with all the changes and everything, hopefully it just gets dropped. SEC just says this is one of those cases that it was an overreach, and we're just going to dismiss it and move on.
That's true. For reference, to give people a little more hope on the legal side.
RH is not even in the United States.
That's true. Kind of MIA right now. But as a little bit of hope for folks, the legal team that Richard Hart hired for this is the same legal team that Elon Musk uses. So if you've been following his track record, which has been largely positive lately, I would argue that he absolutely shelled out the money and bought the best lawyers you could possibly buy. And after seeing them in person and listening and reading their work, they're worth every penny. So
some of them are former SEC members, aren't they?
That's true. I believe there are two of them that used to work for the SEC. All right, gentlemen, that is gonna bring us to the end of the show today. Let's go around the horn and ask folks where can we find you and what do we have going on, Mr. J? What do you got?
Well, you can always find me on X at _P90Hex and on Instagram at agent_J Schroth. However, you're going to be able to find me most of the time in the Telegram channel. That's where I spend and interact with the DJ Roundtable community. I also stream there on a fairly regular basis. So the Telegram will always get the alpha first because they contribute to our community. We lean on each other for information and to make us sharper and to help each other on our financial journeys. So they will always get the value first. So if you'd like to interact with us more, you will find us there on the Telegram channel. But other than that, we have Telegram Tuesdays with Dace tomorrow. He could not make it here this evening because he was feeling a little bit under the weather. So hopefully he'll be recovered by tomorrow, just in time for Telegram Tuesdays. And then aside from that, we're probably going to have a Whiskey Wednesday, either a special guest or a regular Whiskey Wednesday, and then book club on Friday and everything else, emergency streams in between. So until that time, thank you everybody for joining us here, whether you're on the live or joining us on the replay gang. We know that time is your most valuable asset. So we do appreciate that you spend that here with us on this wonderful Monday evening. Until next time, Tracker, where can people find you?
Yeah, you guys obviously here every Monday, 8 p.m. I know it's late today, but typically here, 8 p.m. Mondays. You'll find us here. Telegram Tuesdays. We always do that with also Dace and Jay and myself. We're typically there. We have others that are involved in there. We're getting a good community in there. It's really good conversations. A little bit more deeper dives into the TAs from Jay's perspective and other deeper dives into more strategies and things of that nature. So that's really good to always cover on. The other, obviously, then the Telegram for the DGen Telegram community. That's where it's constant information flying around there. That's where it's like ground zero, where we're all communicating throughout the day. So great place, great community. Free. Go there, have fun. You can talk and chat with people, like-minded individuals. Friday, we're going to do something new. We're going to do something called Crypto One-on-One from Walk the Block. We're going to start diving into getting back to the basics for a lot of people who don't understand. So if you're new to crypto, you don't quite understand, or even if you've been seasoned, this is a way to freshen up on some things that you may have a false impression that you understand or don't know. But we're going to start this Friday. We're going to go into a Crypto One-on-One course. It's going to be more of a, why the heck would I even care about investing in crypto to begin with? So that's what we're going to dive into on Friday. And then every week we're looking to have another course, which is going to start diving into the fundamentals so we can get into that. Because I think a lot of us, a lot of folks out there do not have the fundamentals and the basics down. I think they know it, but they don't. And it also isn't a way for us to kind of freshen up on our side too. So, and also hopefully spread the knowledge and help others that are trying to get into this world, which is littered with mines all over the place because of due to lack of regulation and structure. So we're trying to help build a community of an area where it's safe for people to come to and learn with like-minded individuals, and to hopefully empower you to make better decisions. So that's where you can find us. This week's gonna be a busy one. It's gonna be fun.
Love it. Folks, if you would not mind, please do us the YouTube pleasantries. Give us the like, comment, subscribe, that sort of deal. And while you're at it, go ahead and head over to Twitter, where you can find us at WalkTheBlockNDF. That is our tag. We post a lot of stuff over there. We also give show updates. So if you want to stay up to date with all the stuff we have coming out, and when we go live, that's one of the places to do it. Other than that, folks, I am Zenith. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at ZenithDI. And until we catch you guys next time, we hope that you all continue to safely navigate the crypto and cyber seas, and continue to navigate digital finance responsibly. So until then, everyone, good night.